As this campaign unfolds, it's becoming increasingly clear that Labor is on a unity ticket with the Greens, with an anti-business, anti-investment, anti-growth, anti-jobs agenda. That is not what Australia needs right now. We continue to face global economic headwinds. We continue having to deal with a global economy under pressure. We continue to work through our economic transition from record resource investment driven growth to broader drivers of growth in a strong and diversified economy. And what Australia needs right now is political stability and the implementation of our national economic plan for jobs and growth. Happy to take questions.
Your own government research says that 75% of humanitarian entrants arrive with at least a high school level of education in Australia. Does that not debunk what Peter Dutton's been saying?
The coalition has been able to fix up the Labor-Green mess at our borders. Under the Labor-Green government of the past, more than 800 illegal boat arrivals arrived on our shores. More than 50,000 illegal immigrants arrived in Australia. What we've been able to do by stopping the boats, by restoring integrity to our borders, we have given confidence back to the Australian people in the integrity of our border security, in the integrity of our immigration system. What that has meant is that Australia has been able to be even more generous when it comes to welcoming in Australia those refugees most in need of our protection. This year we'll be welcoming about 13,750 refugees here in Australia. We will be increasing that number to 18,750 over the next few years. And of course we've also added to that 12,000 refugees from the conflict zone in Syria. So as a result of our strong border protection policies, we've been able to prioritise refugee intake with those refugees in most need of our protection. We've been able to save money. We've been able to save a lot of money. And of course, if Labor and the Greens got back into government, we would go back to the chaos at our borders that we've witnessed in the past, because we've now got 29 Labor members and candidates in open defiance against our strong border protection policies, in open defiance against Bill Shorten.
But are they illiterate?
Again, Australia has a very generous resettlement program. We have one of the most generous permanent resettlement programs in the world. This year we'll be welcoming 13,750 refugees. We'll be able to increase that to 18,750. What Peter Dutton was pointing out is that there is a cost with increasing the refugee intake. The Greens are proposing to increase that to a level that is not affordable and not sustainable within our budget. And we know, of course, that the Greens are focused on getting into a coalition with Labor. If we go back to the bad old Labor-Green days, the bad old days of a Labor-Green government, what we'll know is that our borders will be weaker, and that we will be able to be less generous to refugees, because, of course, all of the money that would have to be spent on dealing with illegal boat arrivals. That was the experience last time.
Should he apologise to these people?
Well, again, I mean, Peter Dutton is a very good Minister for Immigration. Peter Dutton is part of the successful coalition efforts to stop the boats. That has given confidence to the Australian people in our immigration system, and it's given confidence to the Australian people in the integrity of our border security arrangements, and that is of course why we've been able to increase the refugee intake in Australia to a level that is one of the most generous in the world.
It's important to stop the boats, but isn't it also important to be responsible and factual in the things that you say?
We are very responsible, and indeed, when we came into government, we inherited chaos at our borders. We inherited chaos at our borders courtesy of a bad Labor Green administration. We now have the Greens pushing for a return to weak border protection policies. We've got 29 Labor members and candidates in open defiance against Bill Shorten. in relation to the government's strong border protection policy. So what we know is that if there was a return to the bad old days of a Labor Green government, it would mean weaker borders. I mean, it would mean higher taxes, weaker growth, and weaker borders, and that is not what Australia needs.
On national security, yesterday we saw another 18-year-old man arrested for trying to allegedly launch some kind of terrorist attack in Australia. Malcolm Turnbull himself has warned about the dangers of not being careful with language. Has Peter Dutton put national security at risk with what he said?
Well, again, Peter Dutton has been an outstanding minister in improving our national security by ensuring that our borders are secure. Peter Dutton, alongside Scott Morrison before him, are responsible for stopping the boats. They are responsible for successfully protecting our borders, when what we inherited from Labor and the Greens was chaos at our borders, chaos that would return if you would go back to the bad old days of a Labor Green government.
Do you stand by your $55 a tonne iron ore price in the budget?
Well, as you know, and as we've said very clearly all the way through, the iron ore price assumption is a technical assumption by Treasury based on an average price over a preceding period. When we came into government, that price was $120 a tonne. We had to downgrade that at every subsequent budget update and budget until this budget, when the price in the market, the relevant average price in the market was $55 a tonne. Obviously, there will be a pre-election economic and fiscal outlook sometime in the near future, within the prescribed time under the chart of budget honesty, and it'll be obviously a matter for the Secretaries of Treasury and Finance to finalise these numbers consistent with their usual methodology.
Would you be surprised if they change it after 2 weeks? I mean, it's supposed to be for over 4 years. I mean, if they change it, it's going to make the whole budget different.
Well, you're not quite right when you say that the price forecasts in the budget are for 4 years. Nobody knows what the price is over a 4-year period. Nobody knows that. And the proof is in the pudding. In the 2.5 years that we've been in government, because of the technical assumption that has been used and is consistently being used, where you take the average price over the preceding 4-week period, we have had to downgrade the iron ore price forecast from $120 a tonne to $90 a tonne to $60 a tonne, down to at some point $39 a tonne. And in the most recent budget, the appropriate and irrelevant figure was $55 a tonne. It is based on a technical assumption taking a relevant average price over the preceding 4-week period, and I would assume that in the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook the same methodology would be used.
Is David Feeney in contempt of Parliament, and will the Coalition pursue him in the House over this? Look,
I mean, David Feeney has acknowledged that he's made a mistake. He's obviously omitted to report certain information that he should have reported. He says he'll correct that, so that's fine. The broader, more important point is that it really exposes the hypocrisy with Labor's policy on negative gearing. Under Labor's policy on negative gearing, all of those Labor members of Parliament that are currently negatively gearing existing investment properties will be able to continue to do so while they're taking that opportunity away from everybody else. They're proposing to take that opportunity away from mum and dad investors. Under negative gearing, mum and dad investors, middle income earners around Australia, are able to leverage the value of their home and their existing income to invest in income producing or appreciating assets, whether that's a small business, whether that's shares, whether that's a commercial property, or indeed whether that is a residential investment property. Labor wants to take that opportunity away. It will of course drive up the cost of rents. It will drive down the value of existing properties, and it will make it harder for families across Australia to get ahead. It's a bad policy. It's a policy that Labor should step back from, and of course the recent reports in relation to Mr. Feeney, and indeed in relation to other Labor members of Parliament, just expose the hypocrisy when it comes to Labor's policy on negative gearing.
What do you make of their domestic gas policy? It's not a reservation policy, but they're talking about making sure that any new gas LNG projects are in the national interest.
Well, I mean, this is just again another example of Labor's anti-business, anti-investment, anti-growth, anti-jobs approach on a unity ticket with the Greens. I mean, Martin, it's very obvious that highly respected Labor figures of the past, like Martin Ferguson and Gary Gray, are no longer there. Martin Ferguson has described this sort of approach in the past as an investment killer. Gary Gray has described this sort of approach in the past as damaging. If Labor was genuinely interested in keeping prices for gas and electricity down, they would not go ahead with their unilateral push for a return to the carbon tax. If Labor really was interested in lower, more competitive gas and electricity prices, they would rule out a carbon tax here today.
WA has a stricter policy, 15% domestic gas reservation. Has that killed off investment?
Again, I mean, at a national level, there has been a consistent bipartisan approach which Labor is now stepping away from. You're right, at a state level in Western Australia, the Carpenter Labor government introduced a particular policy. I stand by the proposition that if you want to bring down prices of anything, or if you want to ensure prices are affordable, the best way to do that is by increasing supply. And the best way you increase supply is by increasing investment and controlling prices in the way that appears to be proposed by Labor, is what Martin Ferguson previously described as an investment killer, and what Gary Gray previously described as damaging. We agree with their assessment. Right. Thank you.